Samsung and HTC are currently storming the smartphone scene with the Galaxy S5 and HTC One M8, but they're not the only Android big hitters out there. There's also a powerful new Sony flagship on the market in the form of the Xperia Z2. It's been less than a year since the Z1 made its debut, but that hasn't stopped the company from bringing out another high-end phone to help keep it at the sharp end of 2014's Android lineup. In today's show, we're taking an in-depth look at the Xperia Z2 to discuss whether it's got what it takes to keep abreast of the fierce competition. It's time for Tech Radar's conclusive in-depth verdict.
Hello and welcome to the phone show this week where we're checking out the Sony Xperia Z2. It's a new smartphone, it's meant to be pretty good. John's reviewed it. Is it any good, John?
It is pretty good. In fact,
Thank
it's
God.
an excellent smartphone. It does everything you'd expect a high-end flagship to do. It's got great power, it's got a great screen, it's got really good battery life. The only reservation is it doesn't do anything on top of that expected genre of specification. It doesn't really have anything to make it really stand out in the very competitive high end.
You see, I previewed this before MWC. And I felt that same way, and it's the same way I felt about a lot of Sony phones. They do lots of stuff really quite well, and it's all packaged in a really quite impressive manner, but I don't feel like, oh, that's awesome, or it's something I can tell people about. I mean, the things that really impressed me when I sort of held it for a few minutes were great screen, the front-facing speakers sounded pretty good, 4K video recording seemed interesting, plus that bigger battery. So, I mean, what were the big things that you found? I
mean, the screen is really good, Full HD, but I mean, but it's also really great on the S5 and the M8. But you know, if you're looking for a device to game and watch movies on the move, the Z2 is an excellent choice. It's got really clear detail. The improvement over the Z1 is marked. The IPS technology coming in has really made the colours a lot more natural, gives you a wider viewing angle. Stuff doesn't look so washed out. So I mean, it's a really nice natural viewing display. Micro SD card also really useful as well if you're a big moviegoer. And the front-facing speakers, as you mentioned, are really good. It gives you that more surrounding experience, although if you're commuting, you'll probably have headphones in anyway. But yeah, the front-facing speakers are also really good.
How do they compare to boom sound on the HTC One M8?
I'd say the M8 and the boom sound were still better. They deliver a richer tone and a deeper bass. But I mean, they're still a decent set, and compared to the likes of the S5 or other top-end handsets, the speakers on the Z2 are still one of the best out there.
Yeah, and for me, again, it's what you said. There's no kind of top-level, really important thing that works really well. I mean, what did you think of 4K video recording? Was it a good feature, or was it something that's just sort of been stuck on just because?
Well, it's a nice feature to have, and going forward, when the technology really sort of starts taking over the home and your computers and your televisions, then it may be a feature that should flourish in the next year or two when the technology really takes hold everywhere. But for the moment, it's nice. It shoots very nice video, but yeah, its inclusion there, it's not a headlining feature as such. It's not the first phone to bring it. We had the Note 3 has 4K and a few others as well. So it's a nice addition to have, but it's not one that's really going to make it stand out above the crowd. I
mean, Sony told me when they were demonstrating it was that you can take a 4K video and you can zoom into 1080p levels and still have that sharpness. Now, I didn't really think that worked at all because you've got digital processing. It looks a little bit more grainy. I mean, it's still pretty sharp, but I don't really see a time when you ever really want to zoom into video like that. It doesn't seem like a huge point.
Exactly, and that takes actually quite some editing as well, especially if you're using a smartphone. So you sort of average user on the street's not going to worry about cropping and zooming a video. That's for people who are maybe taking it slightly more seriously, which the Xperia Z2 can offer that functionality, but for the everyday user, that doesn't really mean a lot.
See, and it's a shame for me because you've got that little stereo microphone adapter on top, and so the idea being that you could shoot in 4K with really great sound integration and actually have quite a professional setup just from a smartphone. The problem is obviously that you use it for too long, A, it takes up loads of space, and B, it crashes the phone.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, videoing after 3 minutes, a file is 1.2 gig. That's a lot of space for a 3-minute video. I got to 11 minutes, the phone got quite warm on the back. Some people have reported that it's got really hot, almost to a point where you couldn't hold it. I didn't find it getting that hot, but it did crash. I had a pop-up, unknown error, and I lost the video I was recording, and the whole app crashed. It could just be more of a software internal issue, which may be eradicated in a software update in the future, but if it's more of a hardware thing, that could be a serious issue.
I mean, Sony's acknowledged this already, and they've said, you know, make sure that you put it to an external storage and that kind of thing. And you know, a number of other people that I've spoken to have experienced the same thing. I mean, it's a sort of smaller part of the phone because no one's going to be really recording in 4K. But this isn't great for Sony to have this kind of element within it, is it?
It's not, and as we've said, we're struggling to find a proper USP for it, and 4K could be it, but it's not a finished product as such. It sort of still feels like it hasn't been tested fully.
So the design of the Xperia Z2, it's industrial, it's metal, it's really nice, and you know, I like it more than the Galaxy S5. So do you think it's the right move for Sony to stick with this idea?
Definitely. I mean, you pick up the S5 and it is a bit lighter, which some people may like, but it just doesn't feel as premium. It feels a bit cheap, it is noticeably plastic, and it just doesn't feel like the price that you're paying for it. Pick up the Z2 though, and it's sturdy, it's well built, it feels quality, and it feels like you're getting a handset which is actually worth the money you're paying for it.
And you've got, I mean, I still do like the fact they've got the iconic OmniBalance power key, you know, something they've kept through, I don't know, multiple iterations of tablets and phones, and I think it's good to have that kind of design language. It's nice to see. I probably still prefer the M8, I think, in terms of holding it in the hand. You know,
of course.
This is glass backed, which I find.
It's an absolute fingerprint and dust magnet, both the front and the back of the Z2. I'm constantly wiping it, getting rid of the smudges, and it's just a bit annoying. Also, it's very angular. It doesn't really curve that nicely, and it's quite a big phone, so holding it in one hand, it's not as comfortable as the M8 with its curved back, which just sits more nicely in the palm.
Yeah, we've got quite a lot of bezel, top and bottom, which I find a bit odd for a phone that's, you know, so well designed generally, that you'd have this extra space, especially when these speakers are so slight and sort of at the edges of the design. So I mean, HTC's got the bigger speakers. It makes kind of a lot more sense to have those chambers for better bass.
Of course, and I mean that's possibly somewhere where Sony could have done better, making the front speakers more obvious, because you don't really notice them. And then so if you go into a shop, it's not, you know, you might not actually realise that it has front-facing speakers, and you know that then gives a preconception that actually they might actually be pretty good, rather than your average internal speakers that you usually get. But you know, it's the same sort of issue with the M8. It has that, still has that black bar below the screen where the navigation keys used to be, but they're not anymore. But they've kept it because it's just a matter of fitting all the tech inside. You know, the circuitry and the boards and the batteries, they've got to go somewhere. So for Sony to fit in all the tech into the Z2, it's had to take some space somewhere. It's cut down its width, it's cut down its depth from the Z1, only slightly, but it's still down. But the height has increased slightly. But you are getting a lot more tech under the hood. So
and a bigger screen.
And a bigger screen. So it's not all bad.
And you also get a dedicated camera shutter key, which I still think is a really great thing on any phone.
It's only really Sony and sort of Nokia with the Windows Phone line who are still doing the dedicated shutter keys. And you know, for some people, that may not be a big issue, but anyone who regularly loses their phone camera, the dedicated shutter key is so much easier to take photos. And yeah, just avoiding the on-screen shutter button.
Would you say this is the best pictures you've got off any phone from this one, or is it still a little bit work in progress?
They're very, very good. They're definitely up there with sort of the S5 for your general well-lit outside shots and stuff like that. You're not going to be disappointed, that's for sure. Are they the best photos? In the right conditions, it can probably pull off the best photos out of any phone, bar maybe the Lumia 1020, which has a lot going on, obviously behind the scenes as well as in the sensor itself.
And we tried background defocus with all three, you know, the Galaxy S5, the One M8, and this one. Interestingly, this seemed to come up with the best end product, didn't it? I mean, but that's because it's got the better ability to sort of software post-process. The HTC One M8 has obviously the dedicated hardware, and so instantly it was a much quicker option. You know, the end result was better from this, but it took a long time, didn't it?
It did, yeah. I mean, the interface that Sony have applied on the Z2 is the best out of the three of the S5 and the M8 as well, allowing you to control the level of focus you have, defocus you have in the background, as well as also applying a vertical or horizontal blur effect as well if you want to. So the amount of control is by far and away the best, but as you said, it was the slowest by quite a mile when it came to processing. Once you'd taken you had to obviously turn on the defocus option first in mode, and then you took the picture, and then it took a few seconds to get you into that interface, and then the interface was very easy, and then when it came to saving, it could take up to 10 seconds to then save the photo, which is a very long time, whereas the HTC One M8 just does it instantly.
It's part of the picture. So 2013, January, I go down to Sony's offices and they show me the new Sony Xperia Z. You know, this was a big departure from what had been before. You know, it was the real first phone from the Sony era, having split with Sony Ericsson. And I was really impressed. You know, it looked a lot similar to the Z2 in terms of that kind of more boxy design. It had the Omnibalance power key. And, you know, it was a real step forward for Sony. But since then, we've had, you know, the Sony in last January, the Z last January, the Z1 in September last year, and now we've got the Z2 already. Interspersed with that, we had the Z1 Compact, which is essentially the same phone but squished down.
Yep.
So, I mean, is Sony making too many phones, especially at the high end where consumers are going to be confused about which flagship they should be going for?
Sony confused everyone by launching the Z1 towards the end of last year, and it does seem like a phone which it probably didn't need to launch. The sort of September sort of time frame is our iPhone and our Galaxy Note sort of time frame, phablets and iPhone. The likes of HTC aren't making a flagship phone at that point in time, so it can probably be sidestepped. I mean, the Z2, is it needed? Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, if Samsung and HTC are launching flagship devices and Sony didn't have anything to bring to the table, that would really put them on the back foot. So it's more that sort of awkward step between Z and Z2 with the Z1, which we questioned at the time and said, you know, it's a minor upgrade. If you had the Z, there's absolutely no reason upgrading to the Z1. And saying that, if you have the Z1, is there much point upgrading to the Z2? Probably not.
Apart from the screen, I feel like that's a big... Yeah, the screen is the thing you look at, obviously, more than anything else on the phone, unless you're desperate to stare at the camera all day long.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's been a big change for Sony, and I feel like if you just deleted the Z1 from the catalogue, it would have been a really good upgrade. I think there would have been more fanfare about it because of the fact we hadn't seen half these things. We wouldn't have seen that kind of really high-end camera and, you know, some of the extra set processing involved. And I can't really blame a company for wanting to do what it can at the right time. I mean, yeah, you say it's competing with the iPhone, but why not compete with the iPhone? I suppose it's the point. But it does, if you try to build a brand and create something around, you know, that luster that people want for a smartphone, you want people to be like, I'm a Sony guy, I always buy Sony phones. You don't want to keep, you know, upsetting them by saying, oh, there's a newer one out now. You just spent all your money a few months ago, but there's a new one out now. You know, they'd expect every year to have an upgrade, and I don't know. I think I'm glad this is here now, and I kind of wish the Z1 never happened. So that's what we think about the Sony Xperia Z2, but here's the official Tech Radar verdict with our video review.
You'd be pretty hard pushed to tell the Xperia Z1 and Z2 apart, as they look almost identical with the same metal and glass body, giving a premium, if not slightly industrial feel. The slabs of glass on front and back add a touch of class, but they're also a magnet for fingerprints and dust. Still, it feels a lot more robust than the Xperia Z1 and Z1 Compact, which we found became scuffed far too easily. The bezels are also a little on the heavy side, making the Z2 taller than its predecessor, as well as the likes of the HTC One M8 and Galaxy S5. The chassis doesn't give a huge amount of grip either, and the angular design sits less naturally in the palm. Sony's done a lot of work in the screen department. Not only has the Z2 been bumped to 5.2 inches, but it's also been given the IPS treatment, making things look far more vibrant than the Z and Z1. With a powerful 2.3 GHz quad-core Snapdragon 801 under the hood and 3 GB of RAM, you'll find general navigation around the Xperia Z2 fluid and lag-free. Sony's overlay sits over the top of the latest version of Android 4.4 KitKat and gives a far less dominating experience than, say, HTC Sense. The Xperia Z2 comes packing the most camera potential of 2014's flagships so far, with a 20.7 megapixel G-lens sensor on its rear, as well as a 2 megapixel lens around the front. The rear-facing lens is where Sony has piled in the tech. The G-lens pulls in more light with its wide-angle f2.0 sensor, which helps it perform better in dark conditions. The phone also features an Exmor RS sensor that reduces noise in images to produce crisp, clear photos. The Z2 performs exceptionally well outside in good sunlight, and is capable of picking out a huge level of detail. Things occasionally get sluggish when playing around with background defocus mode though, and you'll often have to wait around 5 seconds after pressing the shutter for the Z2 to process the image. Of course, the biggest feature Sony is pushing here is 4K video capture. Although the Galaxy S5 and Note 3 can both do this, the Exmor sensor packed in the Z2 means Sony's handset does it better. The Xperia Z2 benefits from an impressive battery life. It's not the market leader, but it is on par with the Galaxy S5 and HTC One M8, and comfortably beats the iPhone 5S. There's a 3200 mAh power pack on board, and with moderate usage, such as email, messaging, calls, web browsing, social networking and some camera action, you can easily eke out a day and a half of juice. Sony also offers power management options like stamina mode, which disables mobile data and Wi-Fi when not in use to help you conserve power. The main issue we have with the Xperia Z2 is there's nothing really to get excited over. It's a great all-rounder, but there's no curveball to keep things interesting. If you're looking for an all-round top performer, the Xperia Z2 is a great jack of all trades. Just don't expect too much more.
That's it for another excellent phone show.
It was brilliant.
It was,
yeah.
Thank you very much for watching.
And stick around and subscribe, comment, do what you want, and really get involved with Tech Radar.